Hey everyone, it's Mike Huber, founder and CEO of the Freshman Foundation. Every high school athlete gets excited about finally arriving on campus. Becoming a collegiate athlete is the ultimate reward for all the sacrifices you've made for 10 plus years to get to this point. However, ask any athlete what it was like to make the leap to collegiate athletics, and they will tell you it is hard, and not only on the field. In private moments, high school student athletes might ask themselves, am I truly ready to make the leap to college? The parents might ask, is my child truly ready to handle life on their own in college? It is absolutely normal to ask these questions. However, that doesn't make you feel any better if you don't have the answers. What if you had a playbook to help you answer these questions before you arrive on campus? The Freshman Foundation Digital Playbook helps high school athletes be ready to dominate the leap to collegiate athletics. The Freshman Foundation is an interactive digital resource to help you prepare to answer the hard questions before you get to college. Your investment in the Freshman Foundation Playbook will help you avoid giving away your first year of college and will help your parents avoid losing sleep at night. Visit michaelvhuber.com/course to learn how you can be ready to dominate the leap to collegiate athletics. Now let's get on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Freshman Foundation Podcast, helping you make the jump from high school athletics to the collegiate level and beyond, with your host, Michael Huber.
How is David Lam making a difference in the lives of young basketball players? Welcome to the Freshman Foundation Podcast, where we help young athletes be ready for every next step in the game of life through mental performance coaching. My guest in this episode is David Lam, a basketball trainer based in Jersey City, New Jersey. David serves basketball athletes at all levels, including professional hoopers. However, David's primary focus is helping middle and high school athletes develop themselves in order to maximize their abilities on the court. David shares how he grew his training business from scratch and how he helps young basketball players improve the technical, mental, and emotional components of their game through hands-on instruction. I'm excited for this conversation. Let's build your foundation with David Lam. Hey, David, how's it going, man?
Doing well, Mike. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
So for those of you who are listening, David and I have a mutual client, basketball player who's in high school. And we had the chance to meet recently at one of his games and got to talking. And so, knowing a little bit about what I know about David, I wanted to have him onto the podcast because I think he's got some great experiences to share. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So I guess the first question I have, David, is what inspired you to get into basketball training?
Yeah, I think that, just like any other kid who had aspirations of playing at the highest level possible, playing myself since I was 9 years old, basketball's been a big part of my life for the last, almost 2 decades. And any chance you have to be around it as much as possible. And, especially when you get the chance to be able to help and affect young lives too. I think that was kind of like a big predetermining thing for me, just kind of getting into it. And just the more I've been able to be a part of that process, just transitioning from player to, coach, I think that, I've been able to develop some skills that I think have really helped out players who I see a lot of my younger self in. So, it's extremely gratifying to be able to help these guys and girls just be able to, get a step closer to their goals.
I really appreciate that. And I think we have a lot in common in that respect, even though we do some things that, from a substance standpoint are a little bit different, but we have the same objective. So I'm curious, were there any experiences that you had as a player with coaches that sort of have informed the way that you teach and coach players?
Yeah, I think that there have been numerous influences. I think that just with anything, you have certain people in your life who come in and show you, what you want out of a coach, and certain people who probably show you what you don't want out of a coach. And I think that along with the experience and just people I've met, mentors and all that good stuff that I've met after I kind of began my training career, all that's kind of molded me to, what I, the experience and expertise that I have now.
Okay. So where are you from, David?
Originally from Philly, moved over to a small town in South Jersey, just like 15 minutes away. And I've been in the North Jersey area for the last 7 years training.
Okay. Did
Yeah.
you start training in North Jersey or did you start down in the Philly area?
Yeah, so no, I started in North Jersey. So this was actually towards the end of when I was in college. I
Okay.
transferred to Montclair State University, spring of 2016, I want to say.
Mhm.
And the goal was to try to walk on the basketball team the following year. I still had, those hoop dreams, just still chasing those hoop dreams. And as I transferred over, I kind of had the idea that I wanted to get into basketball training. I started to, look a little more into business stuff like that, and it really intrigued me. But at that 6 months, if you will, from when I transferred into, ultimately when that time came to go tryouts and stuff like that, something just switched in me where I just kind of realized that uh, the love for the game of, in terms of playing it, just wasn't there as much. And as that love grew for training and wanting to grow myself in that aspect, I just decided that it was time to just dive full force into that.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's kind of had that experience of transitioning into a new career and leaving things behind, that could be really challenging. It sounds like your purpose was to go out and coach and teach and help people, and that you were willing to sort of move on from the game, which I think a lot of athletes who leave their sport, they don't always have that thing to look forward to. So it sounds like you kind of got the bug for starting your own business and then sort of building that, which obviously you've done. How did you get your first client then? Like, how did you get started?
My first client, I think that it was, I mean, when you're first starting off a business, I'm sure Mike, like you're doing everything possible to get your name out there, especially not being from this area. Like I had no ties previously to North Jersey at all. So,
Hmm.
it's like I was a, 1,000 point scorer or All American or All Star or whatever. Something that I can kind of hang my hat on in terms of playing accolades. So it really was just, reaching out to different people, volunteering, social posts, just trying to, do whatever I could to be able to get my name out there, just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yes, I can definitely relate to that. But I think something you said there is really interesting and important, right? Because I think one of the things that attracts athletes to coaches is their athletic background, right? Their history. Did they play at a high level, or like, do they have name recognition? But I think, I certainly know this because I didn't play at the college level, but I certainly know this now, is that just because you are a good player doesn't mean you can be a good coach, right? Being able to teach and instruct and have young people listen and respect and trust you goes beyond your playing experience. But was that something that was a barrier for you when you were getting into training? Like, hey, I don't really have like a highly recognizable background in basketball, that people were questioning that?
Quite honestly, like it very well could have. And maybe, in some closed door conversations that might have been a hindrance to
Mhm.
me earlier on. But I think I was just so focused on, just trying to crack my foot in the door. I just, when you start off in that grinding phase, that grinding stage, like, for me at least, I tried not to put too much thought process into things that could have went wrong, or things that were just a hindrance to me. The conversation that we had, a few days ago, which I'm sure we'll allude to later, just controlling what you can control. And for
Mhm.
me, that was just like, all right, like, who am I reaching out to today? Just, just finding random kids who I feel like I could help on, social media, just reaching out to them, their parents, coaches. So that was a lot, that was definitely where more of my efforts were focused rather than, things that, ultimately I couldn't control.
That's that's excellent. I love that. So what ages do you work with?
At this point now, I'm predominantly middle school through pros and pretty much everything in between, but predominantly middle school and high school.
Okay. Was it always that way, or has it evolved over time?
Yeah, well, I mean, my going back, I didn't even answer the initial question, but my first client ever was a referral. I was coaching with the New Jersey Roadrunners, which is a local AAU team,
Mhm.
and they practice out of this Jewish, I want to kind of like a Jewish YMCA type of deal, like a Jewish community center. And my man Larry, shout out to Larry, he was awesome in helping me out in my initial growing phases. He referred me my first client, who was a 7-year-old Jewish girl who had probably never touched a basketball in her life before. And that was that demographic was where I started off with, just like younger kids. Again, just get your foot in the door however possible. And ultimately, I kind of grew out of that phase, and now working with the demographic I'm working with now.
Okay, awesome. So I know that's a wide range because I have the same demographic, right? I'm generally working with kids who are 12 to say 22, with a couple of exceptions, younger and older, a couple of pros or soon to be pros, but mainly high school and college. So I know this is a general question, but like, what would you say is the biggest challenge you face in teaching basketball players?
As just a general thing.
Yeah, just generally.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is helping players just not get in their own way. I think that a lot of players have a certain preconceived notion of what development is. Whether there's and it's on both sides of the spectrum where you have certain players who don't necessarily have a care for attention to detail. And they kind of just want to go out there, have fun, and kind of do their thing, and just kind of work. The whole like work hard thing will get you far enough. And then you have other players who are on the other side of the spectrum who probably are a little bit too detail oriented, who focus a little bit too much on the minutia, and that kind of takes away from the ability just to be able to stay present, have fun with the game, obviously, which is most important thing. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is just being able to meet clients where they are, meet these players where they are in terms of where their mental state is, and just be able to kind of pull them back to at least what I feel is an optimal mindset, and just help balance them out.
Do you have criteria, or at this point, having been maybe almost 10 years into your work, like, are there clients that you like, characteristics that you look for when you take on a client, or are the things that you kind of look at and say, hey, I don't want to work with this client, or are you pretty much open to anybody?
I just think that you have to be, ready to be coached. I think that's just the biggest thing. Whether if it's a player that's a little bit too young, for example, maybe they're very eager to be coached and everything like that. But my philosophy is, and that's a big reason why I don't really work with younger players as much. I'm just big on like if you're, especially 10 years old and younger. I know there are definitely some exceptions, but I think that that's just when you continue to develop your love for the game. The last thing I want to do is come in and be this source of pressure
Mhm.
or things like that. I think that that's a big time of your or stage of your career, your development, where you just need to focus on loving the game, develop some core fundamentals, and I think that there are tons of people who can help out with those aspects. I think that where I specialize in and where I can really help is just being able to identify the next steps of development and really be able to give a concrete plan. And that's kind of dictated the reason why I try to work with players who are slightly further along in their development. But yeah, I think that ultimately just players who are coachable, who are willing to learn and willing to
Mhm.
apply the things that we talk about. That's obviously the biggest and first step.
Okay. So then when you get a new client, like, how do you assess where they're at? Like, how do you determine, like, this is what they need? Like, what are the things you're looking at?
Yeah, it depends on the setting. I don't take on as many private clients anymore. I've kind of shifted focus more towards small groups just so I can really help more players. And quite
Okay.
honestly, I feel like they're probably more beneficial. Um, we take our players through an assessment session. So whether it's a one-on-one session, whether it's a small group session,
Mhm.
essentially the first couple of sessions are me evaluating them, just assessing them, seeing where they're at with all manners of the game. All the different skill sets: shooting, ball handling, finishing, and on from a try to throw them in situations where I get to see where their IQ is at. Where their head is at when adversity hits, things like that. Just all try to take in as many different notes as possible. And I'm sorry, I didn't even mention, but I try to have an onboarding or assessment call with them and their parents beforehand as well, just to really try to gauge, what their motives are,
Mhm.
get as much information as possible. And then same thing, applies to, when we get them in the gym, we try to assess them in person, just try to see, where the things on the call how they kind of match up with things that I'm seeing personally. And then from there, we just try to put them on a plan of development that works best for them, and then that consists of whatever one or two main focuses we feel they need to really just hang their hat on for the next, say, 3 to 5 months, and then from there we'll reassess and just see what how far we've come and if it makes sense to move on to the next stage of development.
Okay. Actually, you raise a really interesting point because it's interesting because your intake and assessment is actually quite, I mean, we do different things and I work from behind a computer. I'm not working on the basketball court a lot of times or on the field, but the first step is usually meeting with the athlete and their parents. And sometimes everybody's on the same page, but sometimes I hear things from parents that are different than what come from the athlete, which then requires me to sort of develop my own perspective because not everybody's on the same page. Do you have circumstances like that where you come in and you kind of hear different things, or you are seeing things that are different than what you're hearing initially? And how do you deal with that in terms of just communication and setting expectations?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, players, well, players, especially you're talking to, a 15-year-old, even 18-year-old, type of player, still, whether they've been playing basketball a long time or not, they're still very young. And, a lot of times the self awareness in terms of, things that they need to work on or just where they're at with the development process isn't fully there, or at least the ability to articulate those things.
Mhm.
Same with the parents. Parents, at best might have, a general idea, but they're not the ones, in all the workouts, the practices, they just see kind of where, players are at in games at best. And, they, while the intentions obviously are there to,
Mhm.
give their kid the best possible resources possible, and they obviously, it's great that they take, they have that emotional investment to, want to hop on the call in the first place and be able to discuss areas of improvement for the kid. It's, a lot of the times we're all working with limited information. So I think that the more we can the more that I could, intake information from all different perspectives, and again just try to formulate my own opinion of things, and obviously just be able to relay it to both player and parent, to really just make sure that we're all on the same page. I think that is where we've seen the best results.
Yeah, and I have a similar experience, right? If everybody's on the same page and you're communicating and you're be able to be open and honest and set expectations that are reasonable, then you're probably going to see that development. And it also requires consistency, right? Like consistency in the effort, right, of showing up and doing the work and then doing what you're asking them to do outside of sessions and staying with it. So like I would imagine that a lot of the clients who come to you like are really highly self-motivated, so you don't maybe have this issue as much. But like, do you have the issue of like having clients who kind of come and go, or you don't see them as much, or like what's that look like? Or do you have clients who are just so dedicated to what they're doing that they're always there and they're always on time and they're always putting in the work?
Oh no, for sure. There are definitely a ton of players that I work with who are not, as on top of it as maybe I would like, or at
Mhm.
least in a way that would, yield the best results. I think that it's also just understanding too. I think that I've had to take a step back as somebody who's, just a madman when it came to like working out and, just really kind of being on top of it and, just always looking for any possible advantage. I think it's also important to understand that not everybody really wants that.
Mhm.
And also just not everybody really understands what real work looks like. I think that, the image of just hustle culture, hard work and all that type of stuff. But there are so many different facets of development that players overlook, and that's where I just try to be as much of a, not that I have all the answers obviously, but that's where I try to be as much of a centralizing voice as possible to help them understand like, hey, like here are things that you need to do, and whether they're with me or whether they're with somebody else, like you're still gonna have to get done. And these are the things that are going to help you the most with your development, and it's up to you whether you decide to utilize them or not. I'm here as a resource, but at the end of the day, I can't obviously put in the work for you. So just helping players understand that and really kind of helping them understand what it takes to really get to their goals. Obviously, when they're in the gym with me, they're being pushed mentally, physically, all that stuff.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, like I said, I can't put in the work for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because that's a subject that kind of goes back to what you had brought up before about controlling what you can control, right? And one of the things that comes up quite a bit, or at least from time to time with my athletes, is like you can put in all the work, right? You can be doing everything that you can reasonably be doing within, the 168 hours you have in a week. You're doing the most you can, but eventually we're all limited by genetics, right? We're limited by the God-given ability that we're given. Our parents are not tall, they're not athletic. We can really work hard, but for most of us, there's some sort of athletic ceiling, right? Or there's some level of reasonable expectations like, hey, you're not going to be a high division 1 player. Maybe you're going to be a high division 3 player because you're not 6'5" and you can't dunk and you can't do these things. You don't want to take away people's motivation and desire and dream to go get it, right? Because anything is possible, but at the same time, you've got to set reasonable expectations. And that's something that comes up a lot in my work. I mean, is that something you're talking to them about too, just in terms of like, hey, I know you want this, but like this is going to be really hard because of these reasons?
Yeah, I think it's more. I usually let the players come to me with that. If I just kind of come out the blue and I'm saying, hey, like, here are your limitations and things like that. It's a tough conversation to have, obviously necessary, but I try to more so focus again, going back to the controllables and what players can control, and just help them develop the perspective that um, you know whatever the results may be, like as long as you're focusing on the process, you're giving
Mhm.
yourself the best chance at success with by focusing on the process. So either way, you're better off just trying to focus on what you can actually control. But yeah, those conversations are definitely tough, but they're definitely necessary, and I've
Yeah.
had them before. Trying not to obviously put limitations on players.
Yes.
It's like you said, obviously, anything is possible, but at the same time, help them understand, like, hey, like from what I see, you're probably more so in this range. Obviously, nothing wrong, especially when you're talking about like a post high school career. There's absolutely nothing wrong with
Right.
playing at for example, a D3 compared to like a D1. Like at the end of the day, you're still part of the 3-4% that's actually continued to
Mhm.
play basketball at a high level post high school. So yeah, I think it's just trying to be as honest as possible. Yeah.
How do you find that your clients receive the focus on the process or focus on, process over results and focus on controlling the controllables? Like, do you find that that's something that resonates with them, or do you find like it's something you're continuously kind of drilling into them because it is hard for them to kind of see things that way at their age?
Yeah, I think that even the ones who interpret that message the best and buy in, the most, like that's still something that you have to continuously repeat to them.
Mhm.
You're working against so many different conflicting messages. You're working against so many conflicting, yeah, from different people. Like they're getting so much information, and
Mhm.
especially basketball, probably more than ever, and just society in general. I think that one, players obviously are expecting results, sooner. We're in that microwave generation, and I fall prey to that too. But yeah, I think that just I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Would you mind
It's
repeating
okay.
the question one more time?
No, I mean, just in terms of them absorbing process over
Okay.
outcome.
Yeah, yeah. No, I you have to repeat it as much as possible. They're getting so much different information from so many different places that it might sound great, at the end of a workout, and they might feel pumped up and everything like that. But 20 minutes later, through scrolling, through talking to friends, coaches, teammates, parents, so on and so forth, these messages get lost in the fold very quickly. So it's just something that you have to continuously reiterate till they get the point.
Yeah. And I agree. And that's my experience as well. And I think one of the conversations I have often nowadays with my clients is that, somebody like you or like me is focused on their individual development, meaning, are they getting better? Right. Not relative to other people, but relative to themselves. Right. If they're progressing and developing as players and human beings, like I think we're doing our job. Now, when you show up at practice, right, your coach, even if he's a high school coach, right, like he's being judged at some level on results, right, and wins and losses, right. So that message from us as coaches can be conflicting because it's like, well, yeah, I'm doing really well in training, or I'm really having good conversations with Mike, but when I go to practice or when I go play in the game, I'm not getting minutes because I'm not doing what the coach wants me to do. And that's not in their control, but that's what they really sort of lean on. So I guess the question is like, from your perspective, like, how do you kind of interact, or do you interact with coaches, and how do you sort of manage the difference in what your role is relative to what, a team coach might be doing?
Yeah, I mean, as much as possible, at least when it makes sense to, I try to, get in contact with the coaches, especially if it's a player that I'm working with who I know is going to have a pretty big role with the team. Just trying to get as much clarity as possible, especially in that intake process. That's a big part of it. But a lot of that is also just kind of, especially if I can't get in contact with the coach, then a lot of that is also just communication with the kid and with the
Mm-hmm.
player, and just understanding what their perspective is on things at least. And obviously, whenever I get a chance to check them out in live action, that also helps out. But yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be out here giving conflicting messages with the coach. Again, I think that more than anything is going to hurt the kid. Telling him to do one thing or her do one thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the coach is telling them to do a completely different thing. So just as much as we can kind of give a central message, and at the end of the day, I'm not the one dictating playing time and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So just trying to again get back to the whatever controllables there, because there are definitely uh, more controllables that I think players think that they can actually that they have. Just helping them identify the controllables within the game, that at least within their role, and just go be a superstar in your role.
Okay. All right. So you did, I mean, we actually met at a game, right? So I know when I go to a game, I'm looking for certain things, and I'm a mental coach. So what I'm looking at isn't necessarily what you're looking at, but I'm curious, like when you're observing a client, like what are some of the things that you're looking for?
Yeah, I try to just take everything in. Like I would say the biggest aspect of that would just be, where they're at on the court. Obviously, this is assuming that the player is getting a decent amount of playing time,
Mhm.
has a good role, a larger role with the team. But yeah, it does differentiate uh, between player to player. But the biggest thing is just identifying the role and just getting a better understanding of where that player's at, more often than not, and then just being able to identify what opportunities they have to be able to expand upon the role that they're in right now, what opportunities they have, or what weaknesses, I should say, are that they're kind of running into, or certain issues that, trends of issues that they're running into. And then players who may be struggling mentally, who I kind of already know ahead of time just through our workouts, just trying to get a gauge for how they're handling adversity and how they're moving on to the next play and things like that. Just things that I'll continue to reiterate and have some context to throw along with that.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that that you just said that I'm looking for, right? Like, how are they reacting, right? What's their facial expression look like? What's their body language look like? What's the effort level? Are they communicating? Are they keeping to themselves, right? Like, how are they responding to things? I think that that's really important, because I think one of the things I talk to a lot of the athletes that I work with about is the idea that some of them have been playing their sport for over 10 years, right? They've been playing since they're little. And so, like, at this point, they know, right? They're trying to hone their craft and get better. But by and large, they know how to shoot a basketball. They know how to dribble a basketball, right? They know where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. And a lot of times it's not the physical skills or the ability, it's the mind that's really getting in the way from them reaching their full potential. So from like a mental perspective, when you're in those sessions, like what are some of the biggest challenges mentally you're seeing with your clients when you're working out with them?
Failing to meet expectations and beating themselves up on that, or I should say, yeah, and those expectations obviously just being completely arbitrary. Um, I think that it serves as a benefit at times, but it just has to be used in the right context. Like obviously, you want to challenge yourself to make as many shots as possible, to be as perfect as possible in workouts, but it's also helping them understand, the point of like these sessions, is to continue to build up your game, and we can't do that unless we come across failures and we figure out how to overcome those failures. And a lot of times with the failures, it really is just more exposure, more reps, and more tolerance to being okay with failing. And I think that I always say that with every rep that we're taking, or every rep that we're going through physically, it also serves as a mental rep. Like that's an opportunity to develop your decision making. That's an opportunity to, especially if you miss a shot or something, or just fail in some capacity. That's an opportunity to be able to overcome adversity and be able to refocus yourself.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that just being able to help players understand and mitigate expectations, especially in a workout. As at least the more motivated ones, that's the biggest hurdle that I've had to tackle.
I love that. No, I think that's fantastic that that's the approach because I obviously I couldn't agree with you more that, hey, like you're using those opportunities to reflect, take what you want out of it to get better and then leave the bad feelings behind, right? It's not going to help you get better. Right.
Mhm.
So I guess I want to focus on the high school player a little bit, here, because one of the things that we talk a lot about on the podcast is just that development through high school and then ultimately, what it looks like to get on to play in college, whatever your sport is. So like for your high school players, like the ones that have sort of the goal of playing in college, like are there things that you find that you're working on more regularly than others or more consistently than others? Or is it just one of those things that varies player to player?
Yeah, I would say it definitely varies player to player.
Hmm.
There's such a wide range where you might have a freshman coming in and if they've hardly ever touched a basketball, you have to like really kind of build them from the ground up. And then you might have a freshman who's, the fifth ranked player in the country, whatever that means. And
Right.
obviously much higher level. I would say that in general, just, given most high school players, vast majority of them, trying to help them be able to become better decision makers, help them be able to understand how they can control the game and impact the game in different areas aside from just scoring or whatever they're most comfortable in. Just trying to help them round out and maximize their current skill set. Obviously, there are a lot of players where we just have to build up a foundational skill set, but to your point, a lot of these players, especially skill development being, taking a huge leap in popularity over the last, 10 to 20 years.
Hmm.
Players are coming in and they're more skilled than ever, especially at a younger age. So,
Yes.
the biggest thing is just being able to help them maximize those skills and help put them in situations where they can understand how to really utilize the skills that they already have, that they have already worked to build, whether it be from an IQ standpoint, um, or mental standpoint, just in terms of being able to stay present during games.
Yeah. So how much, if at all, do you kind of touch the recruiting process or do you kind of have influence over that or are you sort of separate and apart from that?
Yeah, I try to separate myself from that just because,
Yeah.
I personally don't want to have too much say so in that. I'll
Mhm.
help guide players, however, they need to be guided, and try to point them in the right direction. But I'm certainly not going to be like, hey, go to this school, that school. With the connections that I have, I may be able to reach out to a coaching staff and give my input on a certain recruit that they may have their eyes on. But for the most part, I try to be fairly hands off with that.
Okay. And I know that you work with some higher level players, like college and professional, right? You mentioned that early on. So, like, what's that look like when you get a higher level athlete who's obviously at the highest sort of, highest up on the food chain? Like, what does training look like for them? Is it different?
Yeah, I think that that also is a broad range as well. I will say that a lot of the higher level players, especially college, you go, talking about like Power Five conferences, NBA, and all that good stuff. Like
Hmm.
there are a ton of people who kind of have a voice in their head, and they also have just a ton of other obligations, ton of other things that they kind of have going on. So I typically don't have as much time with them to really kind of be able to make as much of a
Hmm.
impression or input or whatever on their development. So a lot of it is just trying to keep it as foundational as possible. Just again, meeting them where they're at and helping them just kind of round out the 2 or 3%, that they really need to improve on. That I think will make the biggest impact. And just kind of leave it to them from there.
Okay. So it's a few more questions here before we wrap up. This question kind of sticks out in my head, and it's going to be a little bit broad, but like, what would you say the impact of social media is on the work that you do?
It's huge. Obviously, that's a big part of my marketing efforts.
Hmm.
Something that I probably don't put nearly as much time into nowadays. But it's definitely something that, especially in today's world, right? It's definitely a necessity. It's not the end all be all by any means. I think that a lot of trainers probably put a little bit too much focus into that rather than just the quality of work that they're actually putting on the court, and two,
Yeah.
just what it takes to actually run a sustainable business. But I can't sit here and say that social media isn't an integral part of any service-based business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we wouldn't be having a podcast here if that wasn't the truth. I
Right.
guess I'm curious from the flip side of that, like, how do you think social media impacts your clients? Meaning, like, when you're coaching them, like the things that you're teaching them, like, are you trying to counterbalance or counteract things that they're seeing or hearing on social media that maybe they're coming to you with, oh, I saw this on Instagram or TikTok, like I want to do this. Like, how does that like come up, or does it at all? Is it not a thing?
Yeah, I think that especially earlier on, you run into players, or I've run into players who have these expectations of, one, oh, I saw this cool move on social media. Can we work on that? But two, just in general, just there's a big, big, just bridge between, or a big gap between what I believe skill development really is and what players probably perceive it to be through social media. They only get a very, very small snippet of it. And obviously, players want to be able to jump steps to really kind of get to the cool stuff, flashy stuff. But just really trying to be as bare bones as possible with it. Trying to help them get an understanding of what their development process that's unique to them will look like as early as possible through that intake process, through that assessment process, and just helping them kind of understand at the end of the day, like, hey, like this is your goal. This is what you want to achieve, and what you feel will get you there may not be the best route. And helping them understand that. And I think that once you do kind of shift that perspective for them, the buy-in is usually there for the ones who are fairly motivated, at least.
Okay, so that leads me to a follow up, right? Because buy-in was the phrase that sort of popped into my head when you were giving your answer, right? And I'm in the same boat. Like when I start working with an athlete, they've got to buy in, and sometimes I don't buy in right away. It takes a little bit of time to develop the trust to say, "Hey, this guy really has my best interest at heart." So like how do I ask the question? Because I'm sure um there's different, experiences that you have, but like in terms of getting buy-in as quickly as possible, like how do you do that? Or like what are you focused on to get the trust of your athlete so that they get as much out of what you're saying to them from day one?
Yeah, I'm in a fortunate position where I have a fairly decent resume behind me of players that I've worked with, players that I've helped, and that definitely serves as a boost for
Sure.
my credibility. But at the end of the day, I think it's just showing players that you care. If I am taking an hour out of my day to sit down with a player and parent and really kind of get as much information out of them as possible, and really kind of get a gauge for where I can help them at, what areas of need they have, and just ultimately just asking questions that they've probably never been asked by any other basketball professional. I think that's a big start, and just showing players that you're in this to help them. And I think that once they can see that, and once they have that, they can they believe that, then it's a lot easier from there. But yeah, I think that just showing that you care is the biggest and most important step.
It's a great answer, and I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think it goes a long way, right? Sometimes it's not how smart we are
Yeah,
or, how much we know about a game or what we're doing. It's more about, hey, do I really care about you so that like I feel like you really believe in me and that you're really like invested in my success? Because if you give them that, then like they're probably going to run through a wall for you and do what you ask them to do, and that's going to lead to their development, right? Wherever it takes them.
for sure. At
And we
least
don't
also go ahead.
go. No, you go, please.
No, I was saying the old adage is, it's a cliche for a reason, but players don't care how much you know till they know how much you care,
Hmm.
right? And once you have that established, and they truly understand that you're there for them, and you're also like reminding them of their goals, and like help them kind of consistently have that perspective. Because again, like they're you're dealing with teenagers, and humans in general. Like their minds are all over the place, but if you can just continue to reel them back in, it's like, hey, you said you wanted this, but you're not showing this right now.
Yep.
And until you start doing these things that are going to help you get to the place you want to be, then you're just going to continue to if you continue to do what you're doing, you're going to continue to get what you're getting. And if you're not content with that, then it's time to switch things up.
Yep. Very well said. So last question. So, and I asked this question to everybody and it has a little different spin on it depending on who I'm talking to. But the question is what's one piece of advice you'd give to a young basketball player? Maybe it's a high school basketball player who wants to get to the next level. Like what's the one thing that you would share with them that you think is the most important piece of advice that you could?
You have to take on the identity of the person that you want to be, you have to take on the identity of the person who would be capable of achieving the goals that you want. So if your goal is to be, a Division I player, for example, cliche one, until you're willing to do the things that a Division I player is willing to do, until you're willing to work out 2-3 times a day, 2-3-4 times a day, doing all the recovery stuff, the mental work, obviously working on your body, being coachable and being aware of your deficiencies and not running from them, but running to attack them. Until you're willing to do all of those things, and be as humble as possible about it. Now you're fighting an uphill battle, and there are certainly dozens and dozens of hundreds of cases of players who just get their base off of talent. But unless you're 6'9" with a 40-inch vertical, your best chances are just continuing to do the things that are needed to get to where you want to be. And if you kind of take on that identity and understand that whether you feel like doing things or not, it really doesn't matter. It's just like, okay, like these are things that the type of person who has these results would be doing. And you're just like, all right, like, it doesn't matter if I feel like doing them or not. I'm just doing them. And, it's not a thing of, oh, I'm going to post on social and show how hard I'm working or, to brag about it and whatnot. It's just like, hey, this is just what I do. And this is my identity. And this is, part of my core belief system. And every high level player that I work with, has taken that on. And, it's just another day for them. And I think that when younger players are able to adopt that mindset, again, it further helps them with their chances of getting to where they want to be.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
David, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. It was great to talk to you some more in detail. And I wish you the best of luck with everything you're doing.
No, I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much. So, what was your biggest takeaway from my conversation with David Lam? My biggest takeaway is how hard it can be for young athletes to get out of their own way sometimes. They often set high expectations for themselves that can be hard to meet. It's our job as coaches to help them focus on the controllable elements of their development and help them to strive to be a superstar in whatever role they find themselves in. I want to thank David for sharing his story on this episode. You can learn more about David on Instagram at DLamTraining. To learn how mental performance coaching can help you be ready for your next step in the game of life, visit michaelvhuber.com. Thank you for listening. We'll see you back soon for episode 73.
Mike Huber is the founder and owner of Follow the Ball Coaching, located in Fairhaven, New Jersey. He is a mental performance coach and business advisor dedicated to serving athletes just like you reach their full potential on and off the court. The Freshman Foundation is all about helping you get to the next level. For more information, follow along on Instagram at the Freshman Foundation. Please subscribe, give us a like on iTunes, Spotify, leave a review, tell a friend. Most importantly, come back in 2 weeks, ready to get better.